that it's very word heavy, very descriptive heavy. I have aphantasia.
Okay, this is what I needed to hear. So Anne goes on to talk about how reading Tolkien with aphantasia is difficult because it is so description heavy. And I also have aphantasia. I've also been told my entire life that I would love Lord of the Rings if I could just get through it. And I have tried. I have read The Hobbit 3 separate times. I have big thoughts on The Hobbit. I have attempted to read Fellowship of the Ring 3 separate times. I'm working on my 3rd attempt right now. The first time I read it, I got through Fellowship and did not pick up The Two Towers. The second time, I got to right about where I'm at right now before I had to give it up and set it aside, because it is so much description of the woods and the grasslands and what they're like, where they're traveling through, and there's not a lot of dialogue that isn't poetry, and even that is a little bit difficult to get through and to try to pull the nuanced bits out of it and figure out what's actually being said. So I have not gotten through all of the Lord of the Rings. That being said, hearing Anne talk about the difficulties of getting through the text, but then the payoff of it when you get to Return of the King, that's what I needed to hear. I am going to continue to slog through it. I'm going to continue to do the best I can to get through it, because now I am very specifically motivated by knowing that Return of the King is much more dialogue heavy and much more of the found family interactions and those types of things is motivating for me. So if you want to help people who have disabilities read more, figure out what their specific struggles are and what they're motivated by, what types of books they like is great. But even within that genre, there are some books that we're just gonna struggle with for whatever reason. And this is one of those series that I have struggled with since high school, middle school, because it's so description heavy, but I didn't have the words to tell you why it was so hard for me to get through until I was an adult, realized I have aphantasia, realized that just pure description with no dialogue, no nothing, that's hard. So one of the things that I will say about The Hobbit, the first 2 times I read The Hobbit, I just read them like normal. The 3rd time I went through The Hobbit was earlier this year, because I read it out loud to my kids, and the experience of reading it out loud changed my relationship with The Hobbit. After the first 2 times of reading it, I would have sworn to you black and blue that I hated the book, that it was annoying, that none of the characters were basically any good. All of the dwarves are just carbon copies of each other, and the storyline just fell flat. Gandalf, through the entire first half of the book, Gandalf does all of the rescuing, and then through the entire second half of the book, Bilbo does all of the rescuing, with the exception of some guy comes out a chapter before the dragon is killed. Some random ass dude shows up into the story who has not been part of the story so far, and he's the one that slays the dragon. Terrible tropes, terrible writing of you backed yourself into a corner, let me just introduce a new character real quick. And I understand that The Hobbit is designed to help introduce the other books, but again, I haven't read the other books, so I'm not interested in how these characters will, their descendants will play together later on. I'm interested in just The Hobbit as it is. However, reading it out loud to my kids, giving actual voice to these characters, in particular Bilbo, he is sassy. And I did not pick up on that when I read it the first 2 times, because I couldn't hear the dialogue. But reading it out loud to my kids created it into a 3rd dimension for me, and gave Bilbo some actual fucking personality for me. So this video is getting too long. Anyway, thank you, Anne, for your thoughts on Lord of the Rings. We are working our way through it. I'm reading Fellowship out loud to my kids as well. The plan is to read through all of the Lord of the Rings, but we are going really slowly right now. And again, because it's a lot of description, the kids have ADHD. They're getting a little bored with it. So we're just doing like 10 to 15 minutes a day. We're only getting through like 5 or 6 pages, but we will get through it eventually. But where we're at right now, they just left Tom Bombadillo's house. So, we're still not super far into it, but they actually really, really enjoyed The Hobbit. They loved how sassy I voiced Bilbo to be. And plus on the internet, I call them Merry and Pippin. So they want more context on who Merry and Pippin are. Anyway, that's what I've got. So thank you, Anne. I'm going to go read to my kids.